Okay, we are live. Looks like we are doing it. We are using. This is Jay Smith, Dr. Jay Smith here, and I have Al Fadi. You can see him there on my right, which is actually over this direction, though it looks opposite from where I'm at. Uh, I'm going to be talking, and what we want to do, Al Fadi. Thanks for coming on board. Just before I go any further, it's okay. You're willing to have me broadcast you, and also to use your voice and also your image for these broadcasts. Just if I'm okay
Yes.
on that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, terrific. So what I want to do is I would really like to take what has happened now. What's fascinating in just this last week, we've had really two atrocities that have happened. Not just last Friday, a week ago in London, with the what we know as the London Bridge killings. That's what we call them. We've also had something happen just yesterday, exactly a week apart. Yesterday being Friday. And Friday, the 6th of December, we had these killings just here in the United States. So we had, on the 29th of November, we had the killings in London of, well, two people were killed, if you count the terrorist, third person. Here in the United States, just yesterday, we've had three people killed by a Saudi Arabian. You used to be a Saudi Arabian. You were a Saudi Arabian, were you not? And so I don't know if you still hold your... are you still Saudi Arabian?
Not anymore.
So now you're an American.
On paper, not anymore, yeah. But of course, I mean, that's where I was born and raised.
Okay, so these are your former countrymen. I don't want to unpack that one too much. And the reason why, Al Fadi, is because when you look at what Mohammed Saed Alshamrani did, this is the Saudi Arabian who was brand new. He had just arrived. He was new to America. It looks like, from what I'm seeing, he was there to be a naval aviator there. I understand that the program they have there in Pensacola, the largest group of young cadets to learn be pilots are from Saudi Arabia. They are the ones. So there's a large new group that's just come in, and it looks like he was angered at America. He is just very angry at everything he knows about America, or what he thinks he knows about America. And this could be cultural shock, and this happens often to people when they move to a new country. I know about this, having moved to many new countries, and I know what culture shock is like. And when you are in culture shock, sometimes you do things that you wouldn't normally do elsewhere, or in a similar situation. So let's not unpack that as much today, if it's also okay. That for maybe for another live stream at another time. What I'd really like to do is go back to Usman Khan the week before, and I've already done a live stream with Hatun on Wednesday, and we did an awful lot of looking back and who Usman Khan is, what he did, why he did it, about the letters that he wrote in 2012 to get out of to move into a program called DDP, which is Desistance and Disengagement Program, and how the Desistance and Disengagement Program seems to have really misconstrued who he was all about. And I would like to pick up that real quickly with you right here. Are you aware, Al Fadi, of this program? Do you know much about it?
Well, it came to my attention only when this incident happened. I did not know that they have such a program in England. I knew about this in Saudi. They have a program like this, of course.
Okay. And in the one in Saudi Arabia, like the one here, does it go through... Let me just show you what they go through. These are the 6 areas that they try to really zero in on. The first area is the idea that the convicts have identity problem. Number 2, that they have low self-esteem. Number 3, that they have no meaning in life. Number 4, that they have no purpose for life. Number 5, that they have psychological problems and need psychological support. And number 6, that they are theologically inept, that they don't really have a theological understanding, or that they aren't even theological. Now, hearing those 6 areas, would you say, coming from Saudi Arabia, coming from a Muslim background yourself, does this look like a Muslim to you? Would this be something that would identify a Muslim convict?
It sounds to me that they're trying this particular Muslim that joins a program like this to forget that he's a Muslim to begin with. That's what's going on, which is, to me, it's impossible. You're asking a Muslim to deny his belief, his faith, and somehow rethink about his book and his prophet and what gives them the right to earn good deeds. This is pretty much what sounded to me when you're reading it.
Okay, Al-Fadi, let me just walk through these six with you then. Let's unpack them. Do Muslims you know, do they have any, do they not have an identity?
Of course they do. They're proud of it, actually, and it's part of their heritage, and they call themselves Muslims, part of a bigger community, actually,
Okay.
not just themselves.
How about low self-esteem? Are the Muslims you meet, do they have low self-esteem?
This particular item doesn't work because, like I said, the Muslims in general, like myself when I was growing up, we have a community. You have a lot of people around you to support you, to have fun with you, to encourage you, to even back you up if you have an idea that like this, you want to fight or do something drastic for the name of Islam, that they will be there for you. So the idea of having a low self-esteem is rare. I mean, you have to really be lonely, technically speaking, in order for you to begin to think this way, which is a rare thing to happen in Islamic community, anywhere you go in an Islamic world.
Okay. Which means that most Muslims you know have meaning and purpose in life.
Oh yeah, I mean, from their perspective, they know that they have something in life to do, and especially the jihadis. Actually, they believe that they zoomed in the ultimate purpose, and that's to, spread the religion of Islam, make it known, and at the same time, the reward is to make it straight to paradise. That's the ultimate purpose.
Okay, so they are they social misfits then? So these aren't social misfits at all, are they?
Not at all. I mean, it sounds to me, like I said, I mean, there is some Western ideas being forced into this.
Okay, and I would suggest that this whole program is geared only to a Western criminal. Most criminals, and I'm not a criminologist, so if there's someone who is listening who can find show me where I'm wrong, but most criminals that I know tend to come from social disadvantaged backgrounds. They tend to come from working class neighborhoods. They tend to come from broken families. They tend to come from non-religious families. In fact, a lot of the criminals we know do not have any religious background, especially the ones in Europe, especially the ones in Britain. For those of you who don't know, only 5% of all people go to church in Britain. It's a very non-religious society, and for many of those who come from a European background, especially a British background, would not be religious whatsoever. And they usually come from broken families, of which I don't see any of these fitting the Muslim character or a Muslim convict. And that's why it stands to reason to me that if you're using this program, which is geared towards a Western convict on a Muslim convict, then you've got a real problem here, and that may be the reason why so much went wrong with this DP program and also Learning Together program put together by Jack Merritt. Well, at least he was the one that foisted it. Now, I want to say, be careful. I did get something wrong back in Wednesday. He does not have a PhD in criminology. He has an MA, and I've been corrected on that. It's the Daily Mail that said he had a PhD, and I was going to what the Daily Mail said, and then they were wrong on that as well. Let's now, what I want to do then for this program, since we only have an hour with you, Al Fadi, I really want to use your time. You are a former Muslim. You're very clear that you believe in Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. You've completely left Islam. You no longer go to the Quran for your authority. You now go to the Bible. One of the things I want to do in this program is to look at the Quran. I want to look at these verses that the Jack Merritts I do not look at. And many of the people in the DDP and many of the people who are actually running these criminology programs are not aware of how strong the Quran is, or how impactful the Quran is for a radical Muslim, or even a Muslim who's a convict. And that's one reason why when you look at Anjem Choudary, the man who influenced Usman Khan, the man who is really the leader of the Mujahideen Party, which is now taken on many other different names, the Current Affairs Society, 1924 Committee, you name it. He always goes back to the Quran and always supports the Quran. I want to unpack some of these verses. And what I would like to do is start with the notion that maybe the Quran is a book of peace. Al Fadi, is this book a book of peace as far as you are concerned?
The only time you can really reach that conclusion that the Quran is a book of peace, if you are able to find the Meccan passages and isolate them completely from the rest of the Quran. Then it will give you the impression that there is an invitation to accept the religion. And if you reject that religion, and reject the messenger of that religion, then you're going to have to wait until judgment day to face that judgment. In other words, the blood is on your head, but that's about it. That's the worst that can happen to you. But that's
Okay.
it.
So here's a Quran. We're going to split it in half. All right. This is the first half. This follows the Arabic, so it goes this way and goes this direction, from this part to that part. This part is Medina, and this part is Meccan. He's talking about this part here. Meccan is the first part of the Quran that was revealed. According to tradition, according to the narrative, the Muslim narrative, this part was revealed from between 610 and 622. This part here was revealed between 622 and 632, the last 10 years. First 12 years of Muhammad's ministry, the last 10 years of Muhammad's ministry. This is Mecca, that's Medina. Two different cities where he lived. Now, Mecca, you're saying, is peaceful, but Medina certainly is not peaceful. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And obviously, you're simplifying it really in a nice way when you're splitting it this way. There is still sometimes some parts of the Quran where you cannot tell the Mecca from the Medina, actually, but technically speaking,
there's Medina here. Yeah.
Yeah.
But rule of thumb, split it in half, basically at around about Surah 20, just split it. Anything in the first 20 would be Medina, which is the later part. Anything in the last part from 20 to 114 would be Mecca. Now, is it not true also that if the Muslims are going to find peaceful verses in this part, which is the second part, those would all be abrogated by this part? Am I correct?
Absolutely. And that's where we get the doctrine of abrogation. There is a purpose for that doctrine. The doctrine basically, in a nutshell, says that God later revealed passages that he felt that they are equal or better than the previous ones.
So these are better than these.
Correct.
Medinans come after this, and it's found in chapter 2, verse 106, and chapter 16, verse 101. That's the law of abrogation that's built into the Quran. That which we give, mansuk, we give something better, nasik. So this is mansuk, that's what we give. We give something better, nasik, which is over here. So anything that's found here abrogates what's found here. That's really what it's saying, correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
The later abrogates the earlier.
Yes. Because, and I'm glad you brought this up, because there is a movement these days, Jay, as you know, our Muslim friends, and I sympathize with them. They're trying to really come up with different ways to interpret and explain these acts, that are done by these individuals. And one of the ideas is that, the peaceful verses abrogated the violent verses. How does that work? I don't understand it,
The Quran confronts them on this, and this is why in every discussion I have had with liberal Muslims and nominal Muslims, and these are the ones we're talking about, they have never gone back to the law of abrogation. They don't understand about the law of abrogation. They're not aware of the fact that the law of abrogation, Mohammed Al Fadi, is in the Quran at all. And that's why so many Muslims who, when I have this discussion, are not aware of their own Quran. They're not aware of this problem. And that's why we have to expose it and explain it, and also then unpack it for those of us who are listening tonight. So let's go ahead and do just that. Let's just take a look, and let's just start with chapter 109, verse 6 in the Quran itself. That's probably the one that they like to start with. If you have your Quran there, Al Fadi, go ahead and read it.
You got it. Give me 1 second. I'm going to go to 109 verse 6 right now, and I'm going to...
Let me read it in English. In my English, and you do it in Arabic.
Sure.
Verse 6, chapter 109. To you be your religion, and to me my religion.
Right. And I'm waiting for the Arabic to come in. Yes. So, lakum dinukum waliya din. And this whole idea behind this passage, which is only 6 verses, by the way, is that there is this contrast and debate between Muhammad and the idolaters. And he's saying, hey, you idolaters, I do not worship what you worship, and you are not worshiping what I'm worshiping. Therefore, you have your religion and I have mine.
Yeah. So this is very clear that to your religion. But now, hold on a minute. This is written 109. So it's probably one of the earliest surahs ever revealed to the Prophet.
That's true. I mean, it's part of those Meccan ones, and it's very short. And you're right; it's one of the earliest to be released.
So it would be mansuk. It is over here, mansuk. Are there any nasik verses that confront it and that would abrogate it over on this side?
Yes, and I'm going to go to a list right now that has a list basically of abrogated passages that is done by 2 prominent, renowned Islamic scholars. One is Al-Suyuti, who is basically the guy who came up with Al-Jalalain, Tafsir Al-Jalalain, or the commentary of the Jalalain around the 16th century. And then you have another one by called Ibn Salama around the 11th century. If we go to Ibn Salama, because Ibn Salama goes all the way to this chapter, chapter 109, and he says chapter 109 verse 6 was abrogated by chapter 9 verse 5, also known as the sword verse.
Okay. Known as the sword verse.
Exactly.
Okay.
The very name, Jay, should cause you to pause. What does it mean? This verse is called the sword verse. The sword doesn't bring good news.
We're going to go through that later. I don't want to get into it right now about these violent verses. What I do want to do is I want to first go to what possibly are the peaceful verses. So chapter 109, verse 6, we have pretty much substantiated is a very weak verse.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Abrogated by, we have about 160 now. I just found out on Wednesday, it's up to 160 violent verses, all found in this part of the Quran, the Medinan part of the Quran.
Yes.
So any good Muslim who understands exegesis, who understands the law of abrogation, should not be going to chapter 109, verse 6, because there are so many. There's 160 verses in this part that abrogate it, that destroy it, because it comes later.
Yes. And you know, Jay, may I say something about chapter 109, verse 6? It's an interesting thing, by the way. If you look at the couple of passages before it, when the speaker, in this case Muhammad, is saying, I did not worship what you worship, and you will not worship what I worship. There is a past tense, future tense. I would argue that he's saying, in between, I'm going to give you the choice either to worship what I'm worshiping or you'll be annihilated.
Okay, so you're saying this actually turns out quite violent.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, verse 4 and 5, I shall not worship that which you are worshiping, nor will you worship that which I worship. There it is right there in the two preceding verses.
Yeah, he's talking about a future thing now.
Okay, so that's fascinating. So that's the way you would interpret this verse. Not everybody would agree with that, but that's a fascinating spin on that. Now, let me go to another verse that comes up all the time. For there is no compulsion in religion. Chapter 2, verse 256.
That's right.
If you have it in front of you, and if anybody's watching, please go with us, because this is a Medinan. This is supposedly a Medinan verse. So chapter 2, verse 256. And if you could unpack that a little bit, Al Fadi. There is no compulsion in religion.
Yeah, you read it in English already, and basically the Arabic says "La ikraha fi din," meaning no one is going to really force you to accept a religion. And obviously many times you probably have dealt with this, Jay, that Muslims will say, you see, there is freedom of religion right here. It's not talking just about Islam, although one will argue the word deen here is in reference to Islam. But regardless, the idea here, they'll tell you, look, there is no one here that is being forced to leave their religion for any other religion, technically speaking.
Yeah, I was. In fact, I had this happen. This happened personally with me with Lord Ahmed in the House of Lords. I was in the House of Lords with Baroness Cox a number of years ago, and we were trying to shut down these the Sharia courts that are in Britain. We have over 80 of them now that are official, that are considered to be authoritative by British law since 2009. And we were there trying to shut these down. And he walks in and he turned to all of us and says, you know, what is the problem here? We're a religion of peace, for there is no compulsion in religion. And so I raised my hand and I said, Lord Ahmed, do you know where that's found in the Quran? He says, no, I'm not a theologian. And I said, well, before you quote it, you might want to look at where it is. You might want to also read it. It's in chapter 2, verse 256. Why don't you read the whole verse and then read the verse that follows it? Because the verse that follows it, 257. But as for those who disbelieve their awliya, they bring them out from light into darkness. Those are the dwellers of fire, and they will abide therein forever. Now tell me if there's no compulsion. And he was quiet because he hadn't read the following verse, which then gives the context. This is not for us really as non-believers. This is for believers. This is for him as a Muslim. This is a verse that he needs to read for himself. Why is he quoting it to us? What's more, it's full of compulsion. When you look at the very next verse, it talks all about, if you don't believe, you're going to be in hellfire. Now tell me if there's no compulsion. So that's something that I like the exegetes to wrestle with, but don't, for heaven's sakes, don't foist that upon us. And you can see he had not done this. And this is what a problem a lot of Muslims do who quote these verses. They don't read the context. They don't look at the next verse. They don't look and see that in many respects, this is full of compulsion for any regard, but this is not even for a non-Muslim. That's for a Muslim. He then went to another one. He said, well, then, yes, but it says, if you are attacked, defend yourself, but don't go beyond the limits. So I raised my hand and said, do you know where that's found? He says, no. He said, I'm not a theologian. I said, there you go again. You're using the Quran, but you're not a theologian, but you don't even know where it's found. It's in chapter 2, verse 190. So if you look up in chapter 2, verse 190, Al Fadi, let's do that one next. Chapter 2, verse 190 in your Quran, because that's the one that he brought up, and I'd like to see what you do with that. Chapter 2, verse 190. I'll read it in English first, and then if you can read it in Arabic, the following.
Yeah. And just to tell people, if you don't mind me, about 250, the majority opinion is that it was abrogated by chapter 9, verse 73, just for the knowledge of people, basically. Okay,
repeat that again. That's good before we move on to 190. That it's abrogated using the law of abrogation.
Correct. And the majority agree that it was chapter 9, verse 73 that abrogated chapter 2, verse 256, meaning abrogated this claim that there is no compulsion in religion.
So it's right. There is on 2 counts. You can't use 256. It is not. There is full of compulsion if you look at the context. And secondly, it's abrogated. If you want to call it and say that it is a good one on peace, it's abrogated by chapter 9, verse 73. Now let's look at chapter 2, verse 190. And fight in the way of Allah those who fight you, but transgress not the limits. Truly, Allah likes not the transgressors. So go ahead, and they will say, when they say fight, it says when you're attacked first. If you're attacked first, defend yourself. Fight, defend yourself. You need to fight, but don't go beyond the limits. So I asked him, and I said, okay, and what limits are you not to go beyond? Now, read it in Arabic, first of all, and see if that's correct. If we've got the English correct.
Well, yes. I mean, the English did capture at least the Arabic meaning, وَلَا تَعْتَدُوا, so do not transgress, for God does not like the transgressors. That's true, but you know, the idea is, what are we talking about here? I mean, what are these limits? So what do they typically tell you about that?
Well, look at the very next verse. And this is why you always read the next verse. And we're going to do that with every one of these. Read 191, because what limits are they not to go beyond if someone attacks you? And kill them wherever ye find them, it says, and turn them out from where they have turned you out. And al-fitna is worse than killing. And fight not with them in al-Masjid al-Haram. That's the one in Mecca. Unless they fight you. They believe it's in Mecca. But if they attack you, then kill them. So this is not really a peaceful verse, and it's not a verse that Muslims really should go to. But I would like to know what the limits are. I mean, I would like to know what is it that they're attacked. If they attack you, kill them, for heaven's sakes. Get rid of them. Don't negotiate with them.
Yeah.
Really, what you're saying here is this is actually the limits. There's no limits. Once you've killed me, there is no limits. I'm dead. Too late.
That is true. And, you know, look what Qurtubi says. Qurtubi, by the way, I like to use Tabari, Qurtubi, Ibn Kathir, but Qurtubi is 7th century, so which means that he would have been at least, he's 13th century, so he's about 600, 700 years after the time of the revelation of the Quran, which means that if there is any opinion that continued up until that time, we will begin to see signs of that. He said actually the very first command, and fight those, abrogated everything that came behind it. There is a command to fight. Why would you even worry about limits anymore? That's what he's saying.
Okay, so it's very clear from what he's saying. Can you hear me? Suddenly I've lost you, Al Fadi.
I can hear you. How about you?
Okay, let's continue on. Let's continue on. Now, probably the one that I really want to talk about more than any others is what happened the very next morning after, well, actually a week from today, after Usman Khan killed these 2 beautiful individuals and wounded the other 3, 2 who are still in hospital, even a week later. He then was killed outside by the police. The next day, after this was all over the news, one of my teammates, was right there on the other side of the river at London Bridge Station, and he had to be evacuated, and he had to get on a bus. They were stopped all the trains down because of these killings. So he was very close to the situation that happened. And we were actually talking to him, telling him what was going on, because he couldn't figure out what was happening, and we were watching live coverage as to what was going on. And so we were sending him, including the videos of Usman Khan being killed. And so that's why he was very glad to get out of that area. But that very next day, Saturday morning, so this is the 30th of November, two Muslims early in the morning to the bridge, and there were reporters waiting for them, and they stood there with their heads bowed, praying at the spot that Usman Khan was killed. Interesting, they prayed at the spot that Usman Khan was killed, not where the other two were killed, because they didn't realize that the other two were killed in Fishmonger's Hall, not on the bridge. Only he was killed out there. And of course, the reporters wanted to talk to them, and they wanted to talk to the reporters. And they said, this has nothing to do with Islam. We are a religion of peace. What they didn't know is that these were both Ahmadiyya Muslims. Now, explain what's an Ahmadiyya, Al Fadi?
Well, Ahmadiyya Islam, I'm sharing it just in a generic way. Around the 19th century, basically, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad declared himself to be the second coming of Christ in a spirit, technically speaking, appearing in his body. And he claimed to be a messenger of Islam, and that God, Allah, basically speak to Muslims every century, at least, by sending messengers like himself. And when he was challenged, for instance, that Muhammad is the seal of the prophets, he agreed. He says he's the seal of the prophets, but he's not the seal of the messengers. So God continues to send messengers anyway to mankind, and I'm here to serve, the God of Islam, and I basically uphold teachings of Muhammad and so on and so forth. But the thing about Ahmadiyya Islam is that they're a minority branch in Pakistan. They're persecuted, and they're declared actually to be heretical. I mean, they are heretics. So if you're in Pakistan, you have to sign a paper, technically speaking, a formal form, whenever you apply, for instance, to get a passport, that you are not an Ahmadiyya Muslim. I mean, at least some of my Pakistani friends told me this. Why? Because the mainstream Islam doesn't view them as representative of Islam. Now, granted, they are very peaceful people. Granted, they don't believe in jihad and all that kind of stuff, and I love the fact that they're trying to present a different image, but they do not speak for Islam. They speak just for a small branch of Islam that even mainstream Islam rejects.
Okay, and to be fair, they have been persecuted so much that many of them have now come to Britain, and so now they have their world headquarters in Woking there in
That's right,
just south of. And that's why there's so many of them in London, and that's why we have them. In fact, we have them all over, even here in the East Coast United States. Most of the Muslims that want to engage with Christians are Ahmadiyyas. In fact, we have had a real problem in London because all the dialogues were only with Ahmadiyyas, and they take up all of our time because they do not want to engage with other Muslims. They want to engage with Christians, and they are well known as the peaceful Muslims. They are the ones known that they are bringing that they have a religion of peace, and they're the first to say that this is a book of peace. All the Ahmadiyyas I've talked to say categorically, yes, there are no violent verses in this book. They tell me that all the time, and I sometimes I have to scratch my head because it's obvious they haven't even looked at the pages. But what we have found with Ahmadiyyas, and those of you who are going to engage with them, if there are any Ahmadiyyas who are listening to us right now, they tend to be the ones that understand violence the most because they have been violated against. And when you're violated against, as the Ahmadiyyas, as you just said, Al Fadi, they have been highly persecuted in Pakistan. That's where Ghulam Ahmad actually lived in the 1800s. That's where he was born. And to understand what they're doing, you need to go to chapter 19, verse 33, where Jesus says, as a child, blessed be me the day I was born, the day I die, and the day I'm going to rise again. So he's talking about his birth, his death, and when he rises again. And when most Muslims, when they read that, they say that's the second coming. That's when he comes a second time. And when he comes a second time, he will be the Mahdi, or not Mahdi, Al-Masihu, the second coming of the Al-Masihu. So Ghulam Ahmad took that mantle upon himself, and he suggested that he was the second coming of Christ, which means there's a second prophet that comes after Muhammad, and that's where he comes with his own revelation. And can you then understand why Muslims do not consider them true Muslims? I guess For us as Christians, the closest we would get to an Ahmadiyya equivalent would be like the Jehovah's Witnesses or maybe the Mormons. Would you not agree, Al Fadi?
That is true. And another interesting thing, by the way, they have a caliphate that was announced since 1908. I don't know that many people know this, but nevertheless, Ahmadiyya Muslims, if you do not know that they are Ahmadiyya, they will tell you they believe that Jesus was crucified. And many times I get missionaries who are Westerners saying, you know, but some Muslims told me that they believe in a crucifixion. In other words, they're trying to understand, why am I saying that the Quran says Jesus wasn't crucified? I'm like, wait a minute. You must have been talking to Ahmadiyya Muslim, because they believe in a swoon theory that he fainted on the cross.
So
he did not die on the cross.
Yeah. He swooned. He then was taken down. He was put into the grave. And then 3 days later, he suddenly woke up, threw out the 2-ton stone all by himself, overpowered the 16 guards, and then he went to Kashmir. Why he went to Kashmir?
That's right.
Who knows? But that's where he then died, in Kashmir. So that's the way the Ahmadiyyas believe about the crucifixion. What they do with chapter 4, verse 157, I don't know, because I've never seen an Ahmadiyya really support chapter 4, verse 157. But you can see there's all kinds of problems. Nonetheless, now we've understood the Ahmadiyya. God bless them. They're great people. I have nothing against them. It's interesting that they are the ones who are really pushing this idea of chapter 5, verse 32. Because these two who are at the bridge on Saturday morning on the 30th of November, they then quoted to everybody that wanted to listen, including all the media journalists that were there, chapter 5, verse 32. Now, I want you, Al Fadi, to look at chapter 5, verse 32. I want you to unpack it for me, and let's have a discussion on it. Because this is the one that most, not just Muslims, I'm finding that Obama quoted this one. I'm finding that almost all of the pundits, our political leaders here in the West are quoting this verse. This is by far the most popular verse in the Quran that Muslims are looking at to support this idea that this is a religion of peace. So let me read it in English, and then I let you read it in Arabic. So it says this: because of that, we ordained for the children of Israel that if anyone killed a person not in retaliation of murder or to spread mischief in the land, it would be as if he killed all mankind. And if anyone saved a life, it would be as if he saved the life of all mankind. And indeed, there came to them our messengers with clear proof. I won't read the rest, but that's just really the verse I want to read. Those, in other words, is saying, O children of Israel, he who slays one, it's if he slays all of us. But he who saves one, saves the blood of one, it's if he saves all of us. Is that what it says in the Arabic?
That is what it says in Arabic, for sure. But the issue here, Jay, is that we need to understand the phrase, the first clause. Some English translation will say on that account, or because of that, or it's almost like in the Bible, therefore. You got to find out, what was this for? I mean, why was this mentioned? It's the story of Cain and Abel. That's the context.
In the previous verse.
Exactly. He killed his brother. So the Quran says that Allah sent a raven, basically, and this raven, and the raven came and showed him how to bury his brother. And because of this incident that happened, we basically ordained for the children of Israel. It didn't say for all of humanity. The children of Israel is very clear that if you kill one person, it's almost like you killed everyone in humanity. And if you basically save one person, you saved all of humanity. And it's kind of funny because in the gospel, the high priest made the same prediction about Jesus himself, that killing him is saving all of humanity, technically speaking. And indeed, that's what happened. Jesus dies for all of humanity. It's kind of interesting tie to that.
So really, this is a verse referring back to the previous verse, which is about Cain killing his brother Abel, not knowing what to do with the body. He has to follow the example of the raven. And now it says, and that's why it says, therefore, O children of Israel. So this is for those people. This is for that time. This is for the Jews. So this has nothing to do with Islam. Am I correct?
That is correct. And, I don't know if you're going to talk about the verse 33, Jay. I don't want to jump ahead of you.
Since this has nothing to do with Muslims, and this is only for Jews, and it's referring back to the blood of Abel by Cain, therefore Jews, put Jews there, therefore we, the Jews, ordained for the children of Israel we as God, ordained for the children that if anyone, that means any Jew, killed a person not in retaliation murder or spread mischief in the land, it would be as if he, that means the Jew, killed all of mankind, that's all of us, and if anyone saved alive, he would save the life of all of us. It's referring to Jews. Now, to understand what the Ahmadiyya should be reading is the very next verse. They should read the next verse, which in my English translation says this: the recompense of those who wage war against Allah and his messenger, again, that would be for Muslims today, it would be Muhammad, and do mischief in the land, is only that they shall be killed or crucified, or their hands and their feet be cut off from opposite sides. That's the verse that the Ahmadiyyas should be reading, because that's to do with us. The Ahmadiyyas are not Jews. I'm not a Jew. You're not a Jew. Nor are the Muslims Jews. So verse 32 is referring back to verse 31. That's for Jews alone. For those who really want to know what's to happen today, read verse 33. Would you not agree, Al Fadi?
Absolutely. And I want to add this. I grew up in Saudi and I watch people getting beheaded in front of me. I watch people lose their hand. I one time watched a video about someone getting basically, they cut their hand and their leg, from opposite directions. And I watch how they crucify a dead body that is headless, technically speaking. Here's the interesting thing. I mean, usually they use verse 32 that you and I have looked at as a proof that Islam doesn't promote violence or anything like that. I get it. Okay, that's fine. I see why you're trying to use 32. Let's talk about 33. 33 is a judicial. The law of retaliation is applied here from a judicial standpoint, from a criminal standpoint. If someone is trying to basically wage war against the community of Islam, the judge have multiple choices to choose from. It doesn't give the judge one choice. You can do this, execute, or you can crucify, or you can cut off the hand and the feet from opposite side, or you can send them into exile. Well, I'll tell you this, Jay, I have never heard of a single Muslim that was sent into exile. It's always either beheaded or losing arms or limbs.
Okay. So you're saying categorically then that this has actually been applied, and it's been applied in your own life, and you've seen it firsthand.
That's right. And this is for the crime that is called hiraba, meaning those who cause mischief in the land. Technically, all highway robbery, if you wish. If you read like some of the Sharia law codes, it's called the highway robbery. Do you know that a young man by the almost like was 13 or 14 years of age, a couple of years ago, was protesting in the eastern region of Saudi, part of the Shia community, protesting just against poverty and things like that, and the inhumane treatment of Shia, was captured, was beheaded, according to chapter 533.
No kidding. So, okay, so here's an example that's happening in our own day. It's how they applied it. The Saudi Arabians applied chapter 5, verse 33 categorically, and they don't use chapter 5, verse 32 like the Ahmadiyyas would like to use.
That's right. That's right. And again, I mean, if you want to show peace, you can definitely give a young kid, a chance, at least, maybe throw him in jail, maybe re-radicalize him, you know what I mean? Do something like that, but that's not the case.
So looking at the Quran, we've now looked at four supposed peace verses. Chapter 109, verse 6, chapter 2, verse 256, chapter 2, verse 190, and chapter 5, verse 32. In every case, we have found that these are not peaceful verses. And in many cases, in fact, you just need to look at the next verse or the one behind it or the one that follows it or the one that's in it. You just need to look at the context.
Exactly. Absolutely. And you're right.
Then you need to also understand the difference between the Medinan and the Meccan. This is Medinan, this is Meccan. Meccan is like 109 verse 6 is in Meccan. It's abrogated by 160 other verses that are here found in this section. And the whole law of abrogation in chapter 2 verse 106 and chapter 16 verse 101, those two verses that refer to the law of abrogation were imposed into the Quran to eradicate this problem of contradiction, because there's about 220 contradictions between these two halves of the book. And that's why the law of abrogation had to be added at a later date. I would suppose, Al Fadi, you're doing research on the earliest manuscripts. You're looking at this as part of your doctoral research. I would love to do it. Maybe you and I can do this. We need to do this research, looking and seeing when verses were added to the Quran. Once we know the chronology on the manuscripts, we need to start finding out when these verses were added. And I would suggest chapter 2, verse 106 and 16:101 were added much, much later, because of the internal problems within the Quran, because of these very contradictions.
That is an interesting idea for sure. We need to look at some of those fragments that have those passages in them. And you're right, they're always going to be later, technically speaking.
We don't have the time to do it right now. Let's now move into the violent verses because, I mean, there's 160. I'm not going to go into all of them. But let's go to the one that you started with, chapter 9, verse 5. Help me with this one because I've heard many Muslims say this is not for today. This is not. In fact, I was doing a debate at Cambridge University, and I can't remember the name, the head of the Hamas party. He was there across from me. He was doing the debate with me. And he was very clear that this is not a verse that we can use today. Let me just read it in English, and I want you to read it in Arabic. And I want you to help us unpack this verse. This is called the sword verses. Then when the sacred months have passed, then kill the mushrikun wherever ye find them, and capture them, and besiege them, and lie in wait for them in every ambush. But if they repent, and accept Islam and perform as-salat and give zakat, then leave their way free. Verily, Allah is oft forgiving, most merciful. What do you do with that verse?
Yes. This verse is very interesting. Now, initially, Muslims are going to tell you this is a verse that was revealed for a specific event at a specific time, basically, and it's given a kind of a warning, if you wish. There is these sacred months. Once the sacred months, and many would argue it's 4 months, once they're over, now it's really an open game. Go and kill. It didn't say go and reason with the idolaters. No, go and kill the idolaters wherever you find. Notice what it's saying. I mean, no one is basically secure or basically protected after these sacred months are over. Now, why in the world would you do something like this if you're a religion of peace? You would expect at least to say, okay, after these months are over, that's it. You're not allowed into Mecca, which that chapter does talk about that. Or that's it. You're not part of our community anymore. Or unfortunately, you're forced to be outside of this region, this territory. No, the idea is to go and find them and kill them. Why? You need to eliminate idolatry completely from our community so that nothing survives other than our own religion.
I mean, it says you must perform. You must perform the salat. You must do the zakat, and Allah is all forgiving and merciful. You'll be forgiven if you start doing this, which only Muslims do. I don't do the zakat. I don't do the salat as Muslims do it. I do my own prayer, which is we're not getting into that today. A much better prayer, much more inclusive prayer, and it can be done at any time, at any place, in any language, in any direction. But it's obvious that this is saying until we become Muslims, they are to kill us categorically, known as the sword verse. So you would say this is the sword verse.
That's the nickname for a particular verse. If I were to go to the list that I right now, and just to mention to you, I mean, by the way, many have studied the impact of this ayat saif, or the sword verse, and they came up with an estimate between 114 to 124 verses in the Quran, peaceful verses in the Quran, that has been canceled completely by one verse. It's amazing. So if you look at the list, for instance, of the abrogated and abrogator, Ibn Salama, for instance, has a whole bunch of them, you will see the sword verse keeps popping up over and over and over and over again. I mean, because it's the single-handed verse that annihilated any of these passages. For instance, the sword verse abrogated or canceled a verse that says, if then they run away, we have not sent you as a guard over them. Here's what's going on here. Chapter 42, verse 48. If the idolaters didn't want to listen to you and run away, you're not their guard. Leave them alone. Then the fighting order came in a sword verse. Now, no, you run after them. Just like the sword verse says, you go and find them and kill them. In other words, they're not immune anymore.
Oh, that's interesting. Chapter 42, verse 48. But if they turn away, Muhammad, from Islamic monotheism, which you have brought, we have not sent you as a hafiz over them. Your duty is to convey, and verily, when we cause man to taste with mercy, he is judged there. But when the deal deeds befalls him, and the deeds what's there have him sent forth, then verily, man integrate or ingrate. Okay, so now let me ask you this. I want you to open to chapter 8, verse 39.
8:39.
This is another one Muslims do not like, and I want to see what you would do with this verse, because this is a one to me that seems it just seems so clear. Chapter 8, verse 39. And fight them until there is no more fitna. If you could define what fitna means, and the religion will all be for Allah alone. How would
Right.
you?
That's a Yeah, it's a very interesting thing, by the way. The question is, what is fitna? What do we mean by mischief? What do we mean? Fitna, by the way, includes things like innovation. Innovation of what? Ahmadiyya Muslims in a mainstream community of Islam are considered to be causing mischief. Why? They are innovators of a new interpretation of Islam. ISIS used this, by the way, against other Muslims because they rejected the caliphate. They said, well, you're innovators and therefore you're worthy to be killed, technically speaking. Or if you leave Islam, like myself, as an apostate, you're causing fitna, meaning you are coming with a new movement now. Hey, Muslims, you can leave Islam. No, 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 you cannot leave Islam. Therefore, you are causing fitna. And the command is to fight you and to do whatever it takes to eliminate the problem. And you get the idea. Anything that goes against the teaching of Islam, then that's fitna. And it's punishable by death, technically speaking, or fighting at least until death.
And then all will be for Allah alone. So it's obviously they want us to come back to Islam. So you continue to fight until we come back to Islam. That's how you would interpret that.
Yeah, and it says وَيَكُونُ الدِّينُ كُلُّهُ لِلَّهِ, meaning and the religion only for Allah. What is this religion? We know that Islam claims that every religion is Islam, technically speaking, and the final one that was revealed by Muhammad is called Islam. So, in other words, the only religion that is acceptable is Islam. In fact, it's kind of interesting. We started it, the discussion today talking about, Usman Khan, who is part of the group that was being basically at some point led, or at least he was discipled by Anjum Chaudhry. Anjum Chaudhry one time has an interview with Hannity on Fox News, and Hannity says, is Islam a religion of peace? If it is, then why does it do all these violent commands? And Anjum was really honest. I like the honesty, at least. He's like, I don't know who told you it's a religion of peace. It's only religion of peace after the religion in the world is Islam and everybody is under the submission to Islam. That's the only time that it's religion of peace.
Now, before we get upset with Anjum Chaudhry, listen, I've known Anjum Chaudhry personally, where we have been good friends. I've been to his school. His predecessor, Sheikh Umar Bakri Muhammad, would have me come into his class. He introduced me. I've said this many times before. He used to introduce me when I would come to speak to his class there in Tottenham as his favorite Christian friend. But he said clearly that this will be the first man I kill when Islam comes to Britain. Anjum Chaudhry is just basically saying the same thing, and that is, we will be violent. And the reason why, it's not because he has a proclivity for violence. I've known Anjum Chaudhry. He's I mean, most people are going to hate me for saying this, but he is very much like me. We're very similar. He goes back to this book, and I go back to this book here. And that's why we come with two different conclusions. But we're both consistent with our books. And Anjum Chaudhry is told by these verses. He knows these verses. He always quotes these verses. He is the one that quotes 9:5. He is the one that quotes 8:39. Right. He is the one that quotes 9:111. He is the one that quotes 47 verse 4. I don't have to quote it. He knows it. He knows these verses. He knows the Quran intimately, and that's why he follows what he knows. Don't blame Anjum Chaudhry for saying the things he does. Blame this book. It's this book that makes Anjum Chaudhry who he is, including Sheikh Umar Bakri Muhammad, and including me as well, and you as well, Fadi. Both of us do what we do because of this book. You have gone from this book to this book, have you not?
Amen. Amen. And one of the things that I enjoy about people like Anjum Chaudhry, not that I'm endorsing what he's doing, at least he's honest. He's not really playing this like Usman Khan, for instance. Oh, I love this program and I changed, and that's deception. That's taqiyya, what he's doing.
Can we go to that real quickly? Because I know you've got to go in 10 minutes. Can we go quickly to taqiyya? Because I'd like to unpack that, because many people say that doesn't exist. It's not in the Quran. I want you to go to chapter 3, verse 54. Yeah, chapter 3, verse 54, and I'll read it first like we always do in English, because this is the verse I think that's probably the strongest. Then there's other ones. I'm just going to put them out there so people know what I'm talking about. There's also chapter 3, verse 28, and more specifically chapter 8, verse 30, and chapter 10, verse 21. These are the four major verses on what we know as taqiyya. Taqiyya. Before we even get into the Arabic of the Quran, what does taqiyya mean, so people know what we're talking about?
It's almost like covering up something, and in this case you're covering up your intent, your internal intent, your belief. So you would pretend, let's say you come to church and you say, I'm a Christian, but you walk out of the church saying, oh, I'm not Christian at all, I just was saying this because I was afraid of Jay, that he might beat me up in the church, something like that.
I promise I won't. Okay,
so go ahead.
So this is dissemination is what it is it not?
Yes, the word itself, you mean makr?
Well, the word taqiyya, what does it, how would you, what would you define it in English? What's the best word in English?
Oh, I see. The word in English that is equal to it. It's almost like I said, the word cover up or pretend to be something that you're not, technically speaking.
Okay, now let's then unpack chapter 3, verse 54, which says in my Quran, and they plotted to kill Isa, and Allah planned too. It says planned here, and Allah is the best of those who plan. Now, the word in Arabic is kayrul makarin. Could you help us there? Is planning a good interpretation of that word?
Not at all. Wa makaru wa makar Allah, meaning, and they deceived, and Allah deceived. In fact, in some of the Arabic dictionaries, for instance, the root word for it is mim, kaf, ra, meaning M, K, R. It says to deceive, delude, cheat, basically double cross, dupe, basically, and cunning and craftiness. All of these are meanings.
So these are categorically not planning and plotting.
Not at all. That's the beauty about our Muslim friends. When it comes to Allah, somehow the meaning of things change. Like exactly the example when you say, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Allah prayed at Muhammad or to Muhammad or for Muhammad. They say, oh, this is not an actual prayer. This is just blessing. Well, there is another word for blessing in Arabic. How come when it came to Muhammad, it wasn't used? The same thing is here.
Okay, so that's chapter 3, verse 54. I'm going to go to chapter 8, verse 30. If you could turn with that to me and look again at the Arabic. And when the disbelievers plotted against you to imprison you or to kill you or to get you out, they were plotting, and Allah too was planning. And Allah is the best of those who plan. Is that a good definition, plan, for what we're reading here in Arabic?
Not at all. Because the Arab would say, and they were basically deceiving, cunning, and Allah was cunning as well, and he's the best of those deceivers.
And what's the word in Arabic again?
Makr.
Makr.
Makr, yes.
Okay, so it is the same word that's found in 354. Am I correct?
That is correct. And I would love to go at some point when you're done with your thoughts here to verse 23 in chapter 8, because I want to read what Ibn Kathir was saying technically.
Well, let's go to 23 right now. Before we do that, can we just go to 10:21? I just want to make sure that we have the right word here as well. 10:21. Listen, I know it's the right word, but I can say it, but I'm not an Arabist. You're an Arabist. This is your mother tongue. This is what you grew up with. You're one of the best in the world on this. This is why I brought you, and this is why we do so much together. So I really want you to unpack it. So let's go to chapter 10, verse 21. And when we let mankind taste mercy after some adversity has afflicted them, behold, they take to plotting against our ayat. Say, Allah is swifter in planning. Certainly, our messenger record all of that which you plot. Plot. Again, they put the plot and plan there instead of deceive.
That's right. It's actually Allah is swift in deceiving. If we want to use the literal translation, Allah is swift in deceiving.
Okay, let's go to chapter 23 then, verse 8. That's one you want to look at?
Yes, I'm hoping that the site that I'm going to look at right now for Ibn Kathir will have what Ibn Kathir was saying about that, because in here it's talking about the Muslim. I'm sorry, I said 8:23. I meant 3:28. I apologize.
3:28. Yeah, that was on my list. I did have that to go. I'm sorry.
328.
Yeah,
Yes,
I do
my
know. I do
apology.
know about 328. I thought I was going to get a brand
Yes,
new one that I hadn't heard about yet. Okay, so 328.
yes,
That
yes.
was going to be our fourth one that we were going to come back to. So let's go to 328.
Right. So if you want to read in English.
Let not the believers take the disbelievers as awliya, which means supporters or helpers, instead of the believers. And whoever does that will never be helped by Allah in any way, except if you indeed fear a danger from them. And Allah warns you against himself, and to Allah is the final return.
Right.
Good.
And here is I'm looking at the Arabic, so I'm going to translate real quickly in English right now. Ibn Kathir is saying the word taqiyya comes here from a word tattaqu, okay? إلا أن تتقوا منهم تقاتا, meaning to basically to use a cover up to protect you. Protect yourself, technically speaking. When? If you are afraid when you are at another land or another country, and maybe you feel like the people around you, technically speaking, are evil, you're afraid of the retaliation. This is what the Saudi, by the way, attacker used. He says, you know, I really have issue with your evil that you do, technically speaking. But he pretended to be like okay with them. The same thing, you know, you see what happened with Usman Khan. He agreed to go through this program so that he can get an early release, so that he can get his freedom back, technically speaking. Ibn Abbas says the following. Ibn Abbas, who's the cousin of Muhammad, who's the earliest, basically, commentator on the Quran, the father of Islamic commentary, says taqiyya, meaning like covering up, is not by work. It's just by the tongue. You say whatever the others want to hear. That's what it means, technically speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a good one to end off in. I know you've got to go, that you've got limited time. Al Fadi, it's been so good. It's so good to have somebody who is wise, somebody who has experience, somebody who understands intimately Arabic. And those of us who have had Arabic, we do not understand it like you do. We get mocked whenever we try to use it. But when you come on board, when you come and open your mouth and read it so beautifully, it actually does sound beautiful from your mouth, from your words. But what's good is you're able to also go back, and you are a scholar. You understand the grammar behind it, and you've done your homework on this. And for those who are watching, those who are listening, the reason why we've done this tonight is because this is going to come up over and over and over again. We are going to have case after case where there are Muslims who take this book literalistically. They do, and they have to. The same reason I have to take this book literalistically. We both got to go back to our revelations. Don't get upset with the Muslims if they start applying what they read here. Now, we've gone through and we tried to unpack and try to look at chapter 109, verse 6. We looked at chapter 2, verse 256. We looked at chapter 2, verse 190. We looked at chapter 5, verse 32. And in every case, did you hear what Al Fadi did? He was able to go through, look at the Arabic, and say in every case, when you look at the context, when you look at the verse that follows it, or the verse that precedes it, when you even just read it, read the whole verse, not just one phrase in it, you will find it's not saying what Muslim would like you to hear. When we then looked at chapter 9, verse 5, and we didn't go to chapter 9, verse 29, that's for another time. When we looked at chapter 8, verse 39, when we looked also at, I wanted to go to chapter 9, verse 111, and chapter 47, verse 5 to 6. That'd be another one to unpack, because that's where they get their assurance of salvation. And that's where pretty much it says, you can therefore, if you should die in the cause of Allah, you're going to go straight to heaven. Those are two we should have got in here, because that's what Usman Khan, I think, was doing when he turned around and opened up his vest to show that he had the suicide vest. Nonetheless, these verses, be careful what you read, be careful what you hear. You need people like Al Fadi to interpret these verses, to translate them, to exegete them, and then to apply them correctly. We've done that tonight. God bless you, Al Fadi. It's been great having you on board.
God bless you
It's been a
too.
good
And
hour,
also,
strong hour.
let's mention to people that we will revisit this in about 10 days or so from now, since we're going to be in the studios and together, and therefore we will be probably revisiting this topic, maybe in a live stream or maybe in a video series. We'll decide that as you said before.
I think because it's so important, I think we need to do a live stream. We need to do a studio copy where actually we have professional cameras. We'll be doing that in about 10 days. God bless you, Al Fadi. I can't wait to get together with you. We have a lot to do, many more programs to work on. But it's good having you on board here for this live stream. We haven't had a chance to go back and answer the questions that are coming up because of lack of time. We only have 1 hour. In the future, we can do much longer live streams. We will want people to engage. We will want people to ask questions, and we will answer your questions. But until then,
thank you.
This is Jay here on the East Coast and Al Fadi. Both of us loving Jesus Christ, and want to make sure
Amen.
that if you have a problem with violence, please come back to Jesus. He's the only one
Amen.
that really does say that we're to love our enemies. He's the only one that exemplified it in his own life, and he demands the same of us. If you want peace, come on home. Come on home to Jesus Christ. Thanks, Al Fadi, for
Amen.
being with us.
Thanks to you, brother. Blessings.
God bless you.